Maybe you've applied to 100 jobs, 200 jobs, 300 jobs. You've customized your resume, you've written cover letters, maybe you've even gotten interviews. But at the end of the day, it's really been very little from the organization. And all the cost that the organization bears is maybe some snide remarks on social media. And it's really disheartening. I've spoken to a dozen job seekers over the past year, and the pattern is always the same: a ton of effort on the candidate side, and then silence or just bare minimum on the other. When it comes to hiring, companies feel almost no downside for posting jobs that don't exist, for not responding, for keeping jobs up, even if they're filled or they're not going to be filled. It's candidates that absorb all of the cost. It could be money, it could be time, and emotional cost. That's really the crux of this. And what I have come to observe is that this is a classic market imbalance. In the last episode, I argued that organizations are like organisms. And when it comes to evolution, organisms, if you don't need a particular function or feature, they don't spend any energy to keep them alive, to focus on them at the expense of other things that are required. And in this case, actually responding, doing things that will help a candidate understand what the job is, if the job is available, to appropriately assess the situation is nil. They don't put any effort into that. And companies will not change because someone says something bad about them on the internet. And they don't change just because they feel bad. They'll only change when the market costs them. And right now, there is zero cost to organizations behaving in a market where candidates are aplenty. And that's been the traditional lever. When it is an employees market, that is when organizations will step up. But right now, and maybe into the foreseeable future, because of AI and market changes, it is going to be an employer's market. But that's not all bad news. Ontario, Canada, just did a very interesting thing in that they updated their Employment Standards Act. And it starts to address some of these issues and causes some additional friction for employers, including a $100,000 fine Canadian, or about 75,000 US dollars, for ghosting job seekers. So maybe government does have a job to do. Maybe government can do good. I'm Josh Levine. I've spent the last 20 years paying attention to how work actually works, technology, culture, incentives, and the stories we tell ourselves about capitalism doing what it's supposed to do. This podcast is me in real time, just trying to understand how AI is impacting job seekers, job hirers, and maybe eventually what to do about it. I'm on a mission to talk to 100 people about what they're experiencing so I can learn more and share it with you. This is the Job Market Shit Show. Question 7: is the job market a market failure? Ontario's new law and a sorely needed reminder that government can do good. So it turns out government does have a role and can do good things. Let's talk about some classic market failures, just in the kind of traditional sense. There are four of them here that I'm going to list. One is when incentives don't align with socially optimal outcomes. So the classic econ example is when a factory, it's very costs very little for a factory to dump waste into a river, but obviously the outcome is not ideal. Another one, number two, is when one party bears the cost and another captures the benefit. For example, this is how we ended up with the 2008 financial crisis. The banks that originated all of the risky mortgages earned fees immediately, but it was ultimately taxpayers and homeowners that bore the brunt of that uh, poorly organized system. Number three is when information is asymmetric. So, a great example of this is the used car market, where someone's selling you the car. If they're properly motivated, they're going to sell you a crappy car. And this is where lemons and the lemon laws started to take shape, is to create some incentives for evening out that asymmetric information. And number four are situations where there are no consequences for inefficient or harmful behavior. So, for example, payday loans and other high interest loans that keep you in a cycle of debt. If we just transpose that, it doesn't take a lot of a lot of imagination to see that there's a lot of similar behaviors in hiring. We already talked about candidates investing time, customization, emotional labor. Employers almost face almost no cost for silence or opacity. Salary information is hidden, AI screening isn't revealed, and job postings may not even represent real vacancies. In this situation, candidates cannot meaningfully audit the process. We just don't know how to assess our chances and whether it's worth our time and energy. I bet you are, whether you're aware of it or not, if you are someone looking for work or playing this game, is this job worth applying to? When the employer controls the flow of information entirely, it is textbook asymmetry. Who bears the cost of ghosting? Who bears the cost of unclear job postings? Who bears the cost of AI opacity or fake or evergreen roles? Obviously, the answer is always the candidate. This is misaligned incentives, which brings me to some hope. In the newly updated Employment Standards Act that Ontario introduced this year, starting at the beginning of this year. And now this act actually applies to organizations that are 25 employees or more. And here are a few of the things that it does. Number one, there is a 45-day decision requirement. So within 45 days of the final interview, if you've gotten that far, for a publicly advertised job, employers must notify the applicant of whether a hiring decision has been made. I think that that's a pretty good start. I don't think it solves everything, but it certainly starts to stem the most egregious of ghosting. There is a provision for salary disclosure, and the range must be within $50,000. So I know we've all seen these job postings for $100,000 to $300,000 job, because there are some laws in states that say we have to be, or companies have to be transparent. So here we've got a limited range. There is a AI screening disclosure where publicly advertised job postings must disclose if AI is used to screen, assess, or select applicants for the position. That's an interesting description and decision to put that in. I don't know that I think it only is working towards creating this transparency. I'm not sure if it's going to change any applicant's behavior, but at least we can stop guessing for that one. I don't know. That one's interesting. Vacancy disclosure. We've talked about this on a past episode when there is a posting for a job that doesn't exist. So here the publicly advertised job posting must include a statement disclosing whether the posting is for an existing vacancy. Platform fraud reporting requirements. So the LinkedIn and Indeeds of the world must have a mechanism for or procedure in place for users to report fraudulent postings to the platform's operator. I think that could be a big, big incentive. I think that could be a really cause a lot of change. I'm hoping that if an Indeed like job board has to implement this function for any place, it will be easy enough to implement it every place. They may not, because it can cause a headache and therefore cost them more, but I think it's a really interesting that they're going to have to actually create this. So we know that that exists, and maybe we can use that to our advantage here in the U.S. And then, like I said, there's fines up to $100,000 in Canadian dollars, or 75,000 US dollars. Employers that fail to comply must face enforcement actions from the Ministry of Labor, and could be fined up to 100,000 Canadian dollars for a violation of, and if it's more than one violation, it goes up even greater. So this to me is a great example of how, when the market doesn't force a behavior change, government can. This is moving us more into the direction of information symmetry. The law is requiring record keeping. It forces a response and a reply. I think it goes a long way towards solving some of these challenges that we've been discussing. The fact that the state intervened, I think, proves that the job market is failing and that we need external forces. A company did not change until there was a downside, and this is the external incentive. These are organisms, going back to the metaphor or the analogy here, organizations, if they don't have to spend the money, are not going to. If they don't have to make the effort, they're not going to do it. It is their job to be profitable. And that is where the role of government comes in. If government isn't there, then it's just cheapest to dump the factory pollution into the river to get rid of it. But that clearly has all sorts of negative externalities. We're already seeing changes. I noticed in my research for this that a Canadian software system, it's an all-in-one HR payroll benefit system called Employment Hero. In one of their blog posts, they were talking about it and have some advice, which I think is good for all, a good direction, a good way to start for all organizations who are hiring. And to me indicates that the system is starting to work. Let me just quickly rattle these all off for you. I think they're maybe pretty obvious solutions, but it's nice to see them written down. So this is what Employment Hero had on their site, on their blog, in response to this updated law. They're suggesting you build a follow-up system, manual, automated, so that every candidate who reaches the interview stage should receive a timely outcome. Duh, but let's put it out there. Track your process. You got to keep your records of your applications and communications, because under the law, you'll need them for 3 years. You need to update your job postings as part of the broader transparency reforms, which include disclosing salary ranges and clarifying the use of AI in hiring. And empower your team. Thanks, Employment Hero. Make sure hiring managers know their responsibilities and that no candidate falls through the cracks. Big eye roll and duh, but maybe not so much a duh. There is just not a reason for organizations to actually make these changes. Now, in the US, clearly this is only for one province, a big province with Toronto and Ottawa, which will affect a lot of organizations. Toronto's a major software employment hub. And I think that's a wonderful start. But what do we see here in the United States? Well, we did see the implementation of the Salary Transparency Act in a number of states, including California, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's, I think it's starting to creep in there. There's still plenty of posts without salary ranges, but it does help so that we have more information as applicants. There's also something called the Truth in Job Advertising and Accountability Act, which is not even a proposal yet, but it's been discussed by worker advocacy groups. And some of the requirements include a disclosure of hiring intent, i.e., the vacancies, salary bands, and deadlines for removing stale listings, which I think goes a long way. I'm heartened by this new direction. I feel good about it, and at least if not hopeful, then vindicated, maybe. um, and TBD on how much it moves the needle here, the proverbial needle in the direction of providing the candidate some more power, implicit or explicit. I mean, will it fix imbalance or will it move it somewhere else? Companies often talk a lot about regulatory burden. So, will hiring slow? Will they accept fewer candidates to get interviews? I mean, I can't imagine it's going to get any less than it already is, but I could see organizations bitching about that. But it just feels like if an organism doesn't have those external environmental pressures to change, they're not going to. And that is the role that government plays, and it's one that it's regulation that I'm in favor of, because the individual, the candidate, is the one losing, and it just feels unsustainable. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. The Job Market Shit Show is brought to you by me and my company, Great Mondays, a change design consultancy helping HR and tech leaders implement and adopt change. Learn more about me at greatmondays.com. Are you swimming through the shit show? Well, I'm collecting detritus and stories. Send me a screenshot of that tone deaf rejection email, egregious AI cover letter, or anything shitty. Send me your story. Send me your physical examples. Seriously, the shittier, the better. Stories at greatmondays.com. Would love to talk to you, or you can just write it out. Tell me what's going on. I'm getting a lot of these emails now and ideas for topics to cover, corrections that I think people are sending in. Lots of discussion and really appreciate it. If you'd rather read or watch the Job Market Shit Show, you can find us on Substack and YouTube. And one more thing, it would help tremendously if you would send this along to someone else who is looking for a job or hiring, someone who may benefit from knowing they aren't the only ones that thinks this job market is a shit show. And it would help me a ton so we can grow the audience and the reach and have a larger conversation about this. Thanks, everybody. You can always email me. I'm always available 24/7. Stories at greatmondays.com. This is the Job Market Shit Show.